video, I'll introduce you to layers in Adobe Photoshop CC. Now, the Layers panel can be found over here on the right-hand side, and if it's not visible, just go to Window and choose Layers or F7. And layers are a big part of working with Photoshop. I'll go ahead and click the panel, and there's our layer, our single layer called background. When you bring an image into Photoshop, it's going to automatically be called background layer. And notice how there's a padlock right here indicating that it's locked. Now, when it's locked, there are certain things that you can't do to a layer. So there's certain modifications that you'd like to make that you can't make. If you want to make that layer editable, just double click on background, the name, and notice how rather than background, it's now called layer 0. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And it's been changed to layer 0. Now that it's called layer 0, the padlock is gone and I can make my modifications to the layer. So just keep that in mind. If there are certain things that you can't perform on a layer, it's because it's called background and you just have to name it. Now, right now we have a single layer. I'll show you how we add additional layers, or one way of doing it. I'll go ahead and select this image, drag it over to the window. Notice how we've got a big X through this image that we just dragged in, some modification control points there. I'll just go ahead and press enter, or you can double click. And now we've created a separate layer. There it is right there, 17065. Now I'm going to call this, double click on the name and call it Trolley 2. And I'll change the name of layer 0 to Trolley 1. So you can call layers anything you want. And the point of naming layers, press enter, is to be able to understand what they represent in terms of your Photoshop document. Once you start working with Photoshop, you're going to find you're going to be adding an awful lot of layers, and the more layers you add, the more complicated it becomes in terms of editing your image. And so it really helps to name your layers when you create them, just to make sure you know what they're called. Some layers, like text layers, are named automatically, and that helps too. Now, you can turn a layer on or off just by clicking on the eyeball right here. So I'll go ahead and click that and turn that layer off. It's still there, we just can't see it, and we also can't draw on it if it's turned off. So that's important to remember, that in order to work on a layer and make modifications to it, it has to be turned on. I can also turn off the background layer. Now, that checkerboard pattern that we're looking at is representative of transparency. That just means that the background is transparent. So if I were to go to Trolley 1, highlight an image with the marquee and press delete to delete it, we'll see the background there. So that's important to remember as well. Now what I'll do is Control Z to undo that, turn Trolley 2 back on, make sure it's highlighted. That's important. In order to actually make a modification to a specific layer, you have to make